Welcome back to the Floyd Memorial Library podcast, where you'll find information on what's going on the North Fork of Long Island. We'll be focusing on issues and opportunities going on in the community, as well as people and stories from the present and the past. I'm your host, Christopher Bianchi, and our guest today for episode 18 is Chief Martin Flatley. He is the Southold Town Police Chief and has been working for the Southold Town Police Department since the early 80s. So we talked to him about his time growing up on the North Fork, his ancestry, what it was like going to school in Mattituck, and what his interests were early on in life and how he got interested in law enforcement. And he talks about his early time on the police force and how he eventually became police chief, and what he thinks of police today and what he hopes for the future of the Southold Town Police Department. So I hope you enjoy episode 18 with Chief Martin Flatley. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
Sure.
So to start off, just tell me about yourself, where you were born and raised.
All right, so my name is Chief Martin Flatley. Obviously, I was born and raised in Mattituck, in a neighborhood called Browers Woods, which was a very young, active neighborhood in Mattituck along Mattituck Inlet.
Mm-hmm. And then going back further, how far back can you go in terms of ancestry that your family came over?
Yeah, both of my grandmothers died at a very young age, but one of my grandmothers immigrated from Ireland over to here. Mm-hmm. And most of my memories of my two grandfathers, one of my grandfathers lived on the main road in Mattituck, where he had always lived, and my other grandfather lived in Nassau County. So that's probably as far back as ancestry. I had a couple of great aunts on my grandfather's side, but probably my two grandfathers would be the furthest back I can that I do remember as far as relatives go.
And did they come over through Ellis Island?
My grandmother came over through Ellis Island, yes.
And did you get to meet your grandparents, both sides, or?
Both of my grandfathers, yes. My grandmother's died my grandmother's died when I was very young. So mm-hmm. I have very, very short memories of them, unfortunately.
Did they say how the one grandfather came out this way?
Yeah, my grandfather on my mother's side, he was born and raised in, I think, Laurel or Mattituck. So he lived out here his entire life, and subsequently my mother was born in Mattituck too, and she lived here her entire life as well.
But what did they do for work?
My grandparents or my parents?
Your grandparents?
My grandfather that lived in Mattituck was a painter. And my other grandfather that lived in Nassau County was a construction worker. He worked on building bridges. I think he always told stories of working on the Verrazano Bridge when they were building it. So he worked for, I think, Henriksen Brothers, which was a really large construction firm, and as a carpenter, I believe, for them. And
then, so moving forward, your grandfather that was out in Mattituck, is that
yes.
From your father's side?
That's from my mother's side.
Your mother's side?
Yes.
And then your father's side, they grew up in Nassau.
Right. My grandfather was originally from, I believe they were from Queens, Astoria, Queens, and then they moved out to Belmore in Nassau County. And at that point in time, when they moved out to Belmore, my father had gone into the service then, so he never really lived at that location in Belmore.
So how did your father come out?
Actually, kind of what do you call it? Funny when you look at it now, because my mother lived out here all her life. My father was in the Air Force, and he was assigned to West Hampton when that was an Air Force base. And he was, I'm not sure how long he was assigned there for, but while he was assigned there, he had met my mother at a dance they had held over there, over on the base over there. So that's where they originally had met, over in West Hampton.
And then they decided to move out.
Yeah, my father always loved it out on the East End, and when they got married, I don't think it was a hard decision to move out here. They moved into a neighborhood called Browers Woods, like I said, in Mattituck, which was really just a wooded area along Mattituck Inlet. I think they were one of the first houses in there back in 1955, 6, something like that.
And so then you came into the picture in Mattituck. How was it growing up in Mattituck? Did you go through all through school there?
Actually, myself and my 3 siblings all went through Sacred Heart School in Cutchogue, Catholic school in Cutchogue, and after that to Mercy High School in Riverhead, which is where we all went to, and then I went to King's College in Pennsylvania after that. But then in our neighborhood, in Browers Woods neighborhood, it was a large Catholic neighborhood, so most of the kids in that neighborhood, probably 90% of the kids, were going to Sacred Heart School at that time. So, all my friends were in a school, and we were bused at school. So, a large portion of our neighborhood went to Sacred Heart then.
And you said your father was of Irish descent?
Both my parents, yes.
Both of your parents.
Yep.
And then so you went to Catholic school. Do you think was that school, it was all Catholic, was it mostly Irish, or was it kind of mixed?
Sacred Heart School was a real mixture of a lot of the Irish that had settled out here, as well as a lot of the Polish families, a lot of the farm families that were out here as well. It was a real good school. It was. We went through there, I think, 1st grade through 8th grade. We always laugh because going back there now, since they've redone the school and they've repurposed it for a daycare center, walking through there, I remember back as we were instructed by nuns back there then, and we had 52 kids in our class.
Wow.
With one nun that was in charge of teaching and discipline and everything else, and she never seemed to have any problems pulling that off either. But it was Catholic instruction with nuns teaching right through till 8th grade.
Wow.
Yeah.
And then, so what did you do for fun as a kid growing up?
No, for kids, we were all about sports. Myself, all my friends, all summer long, you played baseball. When the fall time came, you played football. When the winter time came, you played hockey and basketball. So we were very sports oriented, and there was a whole group of kids in the neighborhood that were, felt the same way. So it was never hard to put together a football game or a baseball game with enough kids right from our neighborhood. So very sports oriented, though.
I guess in middle school, high school, did you have any role models that you could think of, like besides your parents?
Definitely my parents. My father worked as an aeronautical engineer for Grumman Aerospace in Calverton, which a lot of, growing up in Mattituck, a lot of our parents worked in Grumman because they employed so many people on the North Fork and the East End. Certain teachers from now and again that you really looked up to. It seemed like when you were going through Catholic school and there were all nuns that were teaching you. By 7th grade, when they introduced some of lay people teaching, I can still remember one of our first teachers, Mr. McAvoy, and I think he went on to teach for a long career in Greenport High School after that. But he was like a breath of fresh air because we never had first of all a male teacher or somebody outside of the nuns teaching. So it was people like him that really got across when they were teaching, and he was very good.
So that was a nice change from.
It was a big change
from
yeah.
just the nuns. But and then so when you were in high school, did you know what you were kind of thinking of what you wanted to do?
Yeah, I was always interested in law enforcement and being a police officer, but I wanted to, kind of explore some other interests too. And for a time, I was I looked at colleges actually for civil engineering because I was always interested in the engineering angles too. But I think the the fact that you had to be really good in math probably precluded me from going into engineering. But I it was not a hard decision breaking that over to law enforcement because I'd always had an interest in that.
What did your parents think of you going into that area? Were they
They were supportive.
they were supportive?
Yeah, I mean, we had at that point in time did not have anybody in our family that was a police officer, was involved in law enforcement.
Mm-hmm.
They when I during the summer months after high school, when I showed an interest in being in law enforcement, I had worked a couple summers at Grumman Aerospace as a summer job, and I told my parents what I wanted to do, and my father said, "Well, go down to the police department, knock on the door and tell them you're looking for a job." And I did that back in 1977, I think, and ended up getting a summer job with the Southold Police Department that year. So very glad I took my father's advice, and very glad I figured it was just a lot harder to get a job there, and it would be so difficult. But the lieutenant that was there, Lieutenant Winters, was very open, and he was very welcoming. And it probably didn't hurt that he had also worked at Grumman Aerospace at one time before, also, because I think he had a connection with my father working at Grumman.
And so was that you went off to college and then came back to the area?
Yeah, I went off to college and ended up in criminal justice at King's
Mm-hmm.
College in Pennsylvania. And then when I completed college, I came back and started taking tests for for different police jobs.
And did you want to work on the North Fork, or were you kind of open to?
I was really open to anything. I mean, it's I took tests for the New York State Police. I think I took tests and I went through a lot of testing down in Maryland for a couple of jobs, up in Connecticut as well. So at that point in time, the advice was to take as many tests as you can, and if you do well enough on a test and somebody offers you a job, that's where you start off at. And it just so happened that after taking some of those tests and then taking Suffolk's test, I was in a position to get hired in Southold in 1980.
And was that a seasonal?
No, the seasonal I worked from I think 77 through 80.
77 through 80.
In 1979 into 80, I worked for about 9 months for the then Village of Greenport Police Department as a part-time officer for them. Because at that point in time, they only had 3 or 4 full-time officers, and they supplemented that with all seasonal police officers or people that had been through the academy. So I was waiting to go to the academy. Then I was waiting to get hired. So I worked for about 9 months down there until Southold selected me to go through the academy, or selected me to join the police department. I should say I'd already been through the academy.
And how was it going through the Suffolk County Police Academy?
It was good. I mean, it's. I think it probably goes a little bit longer today, because today it's about 6 months to get through the police academy. And when we went through, it was a lot more of the basics, police procedures and search and seizure and laws and that type of thing. Today, the officers that we send there, they have a 6-week block to become EMTs. They do, the world has changed. They're doing active shooter training now. It's a lot. There are a lot more topics covered now than there was when I went through. But it was a very good experience.
And also, when you did work a little bit in Greenport,
Yes.
how was it? How would you describe Greenport, the environment?
It was well, the work in Greenport was a lot different. I mean,
Than in
it's 19
Southold.
yeah, the 1979-80. That's when all the commercial fishing boats worked out of Greenport. Like, every 6 weeks or so when the boats came in, guys were offloading the boats. They had a lot of money in their pockets. The bars were active. There was just a lot of activity and a lot to do in Greenport then because of the fishing industry, and also a couple bigger bars that were around too. The policing was, for what I knew at the time, the policing was, everybody knew each other that was on the police department, and there was a real, close camaraderie.
Also, I guess you had switched to become an officer in Southold. in the 80s.
Yes.
But I was just kind of curious, for Greenport Police Department, they were running all the way through the 80s and up until 1996.
I think 91 maybe.
91.
Yeah, I think.
What did you think of? Because some people were saying that some things were getting out of hand, or maybe some of the officers weren't being disciplined for certain things.
Yeah, I mean, once I got hired in Southold, it's you sort of concentrated more on what was going on in Southold and your work in Southold. I do know, just living through that period, for 2 or 3 of those years, I was assigned to the East End Drug Task Force over in for the DA's office, and so I was off the road and assigned out of town, so I didn't live through that much of it. But it's they had there was some turmoil between the DA's office and the village police department. And the mayor decided to let the people vote and let their voices be heard, and they chose to disband it. So,
and then for you working in Southold, how was it working under Chief Cochran?
Chief Cochran.
Yes.
It was good working under Chief Cochran. He had a good working. We both came on at the same time, so we had known each other for a while and risen through the ranks together. He had a good working relationship, and as a matter of fact, his mother was even a supervisor for a couple of the years that he was on there. So he was very good to work underneath. I spent about I guess probably 7 or 8 years under him before I promoted to where I am today. But learned a lot through him. He was very heavily involved in the fire department as well. So I think we complemented each other at work. I could fill in a little bit when his duties would swap back and forth between the police department and the fire department. But he was a good police chief.
How did that opportunity for you coming up for the police chief job? How did that come up?
Just really through the civil service ranks. I mean, I was captain at the time, and Chief Cochran, we still laugh about it today because he came into my office about 2 weeks before the 4th of July, which is traditionally the busiest weekend for our department all the time because of the activity out here. But he came in and laid a piece of paper on my work, and it was on my desk. I'm sorry, and I read the paperwork, and it said that he was retiring in 2 weeks, and he said, "This is about to change your life," and it did. It's so we had a couple of weeks to transition, but it was a lot easier transition then because I had spent 8 years doing administrative work as a captain, so you knew the process and you knew the work. You just had to pick up and do it for yourself. But so when he retired, I took the chief's test, myself and one other chief. At the time, because that's what they were given. That were the only 2 openings that they were given the test for, and forget what I wrote on that, but I was in the 90s somewhere, and the town board decided to hire me as police chief, and that was back in 2011.
So after starting there and up until now, what have you enjoyed the most about being a police chief?
Enjoyed the most? I think it's the satisfaction of getting tasks done, getting grants, getting the satisfaction you find in your work. But to me, it's also the interaction with the public. I mean, it's do a lot of work behind the desk at headquarters, but I still love going out to Maritime Festival, Strawberry Fest, any festival that's out there, because you get to interact with the public, and you get to see a lot of friends when you're out there, but you also get to you have complete strangers coming up to you and looking to engage you and talk to you or make different comments. So you get so much feedback when you're out in the different events and different fields, and to me, I enjoy that very much, and I enjoy the special events, like I said, and it's a lot of different aspects of the job that I definitely enjoy.
And what would you say is the most challenging part of the job for you?
I think a couple different parts are challenging. I mean, one I'll always say is trying to keep up with technology, because technology has changed so much since I came on, and it's just every month to month it's new products and new equipment that you have to buy for your cars. I mean, if you think about it, when I started off as a police officer, you had a clipboard and paper and pen, and you did your daily reports on that. your activity reports. You wrote accident reports on that. Did arrests on paper, and it was pretty simple at that point in time. I mean, now we're at the point where we have laptops in all the cars. We have printers in the cars where they can print out traffic tickets from the cars. We have in-car video. There's just so much electronics in the car and so much to keep up with, and just trying to keep a wireless signal running for the cars to use. I mean, we're at a point now where we used to write tickets. If you were writing any kind of speeding tickets or anything, it was with a pen and paper on the clipboard, and you handed the person that ticket. Now the officer is able to scan somebody's driver's license into their laptop. It auto feeds all the particulars. You fill in the violation and court date, and then you print it out from a printer that is underneath your armrest in the car, and give it up to the motorist after that. And by then, probably by the time you get back to your car, the laptop has already transmitted that ticket to New York State DMV, and any kind of arrest or appearance tickets to the FBI, to Suffolk County. So it's all done remotely from cars, and it's just it's really changed the way the efficiency to one degree, but it's that fine line between, I mean, I want to see an officer when I go by. I don't want to see him buried behind his screen in the car all the time. But a lot of times when they do get backed up on calls, if you see a car parked on the side of the road, it's usually the officer catching up on his calls and doing his work on his laptop. And, you want an officer to be responsive to the community and to see what's going on, and to have, that interaction with the community while he's out there, but it's a tender balance between that and them having to do work on the equipment they have in the car.
And was that something like with the technology, has that really kind of been something that has been implemented more in the last 10 years or?
Yeah, I think so. We started off with in-car video, which was new to us, but I think one of the first departments in Suffolk County that was using it back in maybe 2005, I think. But since then, I mean, since the in-car video started, that's morphed to body-worn cameras now that everybody wants their officers to wear. All the electronics equipment in the car too, the laptops, the connectivity, the scanning of documents and everything. That's really been more in the last 10 years. You're right. And and it also comes, with a cost associated with it too, which makes it very difficult at budget time to try to keep, your budget reasonable when just the electronics and the gear that you buy for the cars and for the officers to carry just is astronomical.
And also in terms of just your career working on the police force, did you have any particular situations that stuck out to you as a police officer, whether it was something that was a dangerous situation, but I don't know if that's something you would want to...
Yeah, no, I think probably for the 3 years I spent assigned over to the East End Drug Task Force was probably some of the more dangerous times that we had, because we were executing search warrants and doing drug search warrants. I think one of the most dangerous times, we were executing a search warrant at Riverhead, and we were part of a team that were supposed to blow the front door down and enter the place, and they were actively selling drugs out of there. We ran up the front doorway. I can still remember, it was, I think, January, February. There was ice on the steps out front. The lead officer hit the door. It was supposed to hit the door with the ram. Did so. The second officer that was supposed to enter slipped on the ice, and I was right next to him inside the house, and he somehow let a round go off out of his gun right while we were all in the same entryway into the house. And we had a couple incidents like that were pretty dangerous, a lot more dangerous than we see here from day to day. But that shot in that house that officer let go, we had just cleared everybody off there were a lot of younger people in the house. We had just cleared everybody off couches, and one of those shots went through the couch. So, it's just the timing, and if we didn't clear those people off, it could have very well been a lot worse than that call was. But that was probably some of the more dangerous times over there.
You would say that Southold, it hasn't been as, in terms of activity in the area. I don't know if you would say that. Would you say there's been less crime recently compared to in the 80s or 90s?
Yeah, I don't. You know what? I do monthly reports, yearly reports all the time, and I'm always looking at trends and where it goes with numbers. It's statistics and numbers can be so misleading and deceiving too when you look at them because the numbers we kept back in the 70s and 80s for crime are a lot different than the numbers we keep now. We do a lot more activities now, but it's I like to think that Southold's got the same type of calls. I mean, outside of crimes, the majority of the calls that we do so many service calls. We respond to all aided cases, domestics, that type of thing that fall outside the realm of actual crimes. So that's I think based on our population and the number of officers that we have, we're probably proportionate as to any of the bigger departments. I mean, if you look at like Suffolk County or New York City PD, yeah, they have a lot bigger crimes. But I mean, look at how much population they have to deal with, and I think we all, any law enforcement has to deal with a lot of those service-oriented calls and domestics and disputes and that type of thing. And it's just, it's all commensurate with your population, I think.
And then also, what do you think of kind of within the past, especially since 2019, 2020, 2021, what would you say to some of the people that have more of just a negative view of police, especially in the past few years? Do you think that some of the negativity is kind of, it's not fair to put on all the police officers and departments, and kind of some of the ways that media might portray police departments in a biased way or trying to clump everyone together?
Yeah. It's I've always said, I mean, the worst thing you can do is believe everything you see on TV and the way the media reports it. I mean, during the George Floyd incident and some of the other incidents that surrounded that, it was a tough time to be a police officer anywhere because all of a sudden your residents and your population go from very supportive group, and not everyone, but a portion of them go from very supportive group to look what everything's wrong with the police department. Look how bad policing is around the world. I mean, I would ask residents to take a look at your own police department. Don't judge us by what you read or see on TV because a big difference in a smaller department like ours. We have about 75 members altogether. Population of the town is around 24,000. It's a lot different when you have a police department where the police officers actually live in the community that they police. If you think like New York City or some of the bigger departments, those officers all live in the suburbs. They drive to work in a sector where they don't know a lot of the people in that sector. They don't have those community ties that we would have out here. I mean, our officers live out here. Our kids go to school with everybody else's kids in the community. They play sports with everybody else's kids in the community. We have a tie to the community. And I think policing is a lot different when it's your neighborhood and you're invested in your neighborhood. And that's what I would just ask people, don't judge us based on what you see on TV with some other departments, because every department operates differently. And, get to know your own police department. Don't judge us like some of the other departments. Because I think they're in that time of 2018, 19, 20, people just jump to the conclusion that, wow, every police officer's got to be like that officer in the George Floyd case, and there's big problems with policing. There wasn't big problems with policing as far as I was concerned. In some pockets there was, and the way some departments operated.
And what about the slogan, defund the police? Is that, because it seemed like some cities or towns, some of them were doing that at some point, but some of it looked like it almost backfired in some ways. And
yeah, there were. I mean, that was a popular phrase during that period of time, and some cities actually went in that route. I think out in Minnesota, and I think even upstate New York, there were a couple of bigger cities that pushed towards that direction. Whether they went that way altogether, I'm not quite sure. But I think it's just kind of short-sighted saying defund the police. I mean, would it be nice to live in a community where you don't need somebody to police the public? Yeah, it would be, but in reality, what would that look like? And but they've also, some positive things also came out of that too, because a lot of departments took that notion and said, well, some of the policing is service oriented and really should be left to like social workers and to people that can help on that medical side of it or that psychological side of it. A lot of the domestics that we have, a lot of those, they're not real crimes. They're just, they're just humans that are having crisis or just strictly having disturbances within their family. Some bigger departments that are able to do it are splitting those calls when they come into dispatch now. If it's something where somebody's in a mental health crisis and they need help, well, they don't bother sending a police officer there. They have the ability to kind of triage the call right in the dispatch office and then maybe dispatch a different type of help to that situation rather than tying up police. So it does, I think it was a little drastic saying defund the police because they were looking to do away with police and make everything, as far as helping people in mental health crisis, but you still need that, in my opinion, you still need, an active, efficient police department.
And yeah, like you said, with some of those situations, they were able to maybe have the police, they wouldn't have to respond to certain
right
situations. Right. And then there I guess with some of the anti-bias, people wanted to make sure that things were running well in terms of there not being biases within.
Yeah, I mean, every resident has the right to take a look at their police department and make sure that it is running how they expect it to run. I mean, they pay their taxes. That's what pays our salaries. So we work for the residents of the town. And the taxpayers of the town. So, yeah, I mean, the phrase transparency gets thrown around all the time, but there has to be transparency for the public. And I like to think that we give them the transparency that they want. I mean, we sit on a lot of different committees that promote those ideas, and we've always welcomed the community in to be part of the part of our whole program.
And then kind of just in terms of working on the North Fork for a long time, what have you enjoyed about living and working on the North Fork?
I mean, obviously, the reason we're all here, I think, is because everybody loves to live on the North Fork. I mean, it's a great environment. The people are great. It is changing. It's definitely changing from when I started working here, from when I was a kid. When I was a kid growing up, it was all potato fields, and that was pre-vineyards, and it was a lot simpler then, but things changed. Things are always going to change. It's a great place to live. It's a great place to work. It's a great place to raise your family. I've raised my family on the North Fork, and my kids and my grandchildren are being raised on the North Fork now too. So, there's a reason we all like being here.
And is there anything, you mentioned that it's changed. Is there, what do you think in terms of some of the recent changes post-COVID? Are there some things that you're kind of nostalgic or you miss, or is it kind of some things have improved for the better?
Yeah, I'm probably a little old-fashioned that way. I like face-to-face and personal meetings, and that's how you initiate relationships. I thought the whole the Zoom platform during COVID was definitely helpful during COVID because we were all taking the precautions of not having face-to-face meetings. I spent 2 years, just like everybody else did, 2 years of every meeting I went to was at my desk in my office at headquarters. But I much prefer, and I will still spend an hour or 2 hours driving to a location to meet somebody personally and discuss the topic rather than trying to do it over the phone or the computer, because I just feel like the going face-to-face is a lot more genuine, and you get a better understanding of who you're dealing with and their personalities. And I mean, let's face it, that's how all your relationships really start. Not that many start over Zoom or a phone call.
No. And then, so with being the police chief, what would you say you're most proud of with what you've done for the police force?
To me, I'm most proud of the police force that we've been able to put together. I mean, it's changed throughout the years, but I like to look at it where I've been involved in the hiring process for just about everybody in the police department now. I mean, as the last 12 years, making the recommendations to the town board for new hirees. The 10 before that, sitting in on interviews and having a say in who gets hired and who doesn't get hired too. And I'm most proud in the fact that we've put together a really good group of young men and women that actually care about the town and care about the residents of the town. I get so much positive feedback from different people in the community. It's just a real real good group of younger people, and they've embraced the community-oriented policing model that we've tried to do, and we try to get away from sitting in your car and not interacting with the community, getting out and walking. So many of the officers have embraced that and do it on a regular basis. You get to watch, a police officer back in the 80s when I first came on. I mean, they sat in the car. They didn't talk to anybody other than writing them a ticket or being in a negative interaction with them now. But, between our school resource officers in the schools, we have a great relationship with the schools. Mm-hmm. It's just I'm very proud of the officers that we've been able to assemble on our job, because it's getting more difficult in the hiring process than it was a while ago. There's less and less candidates to pick from, but we've been able to assemble a really good group of young men and women.
And do you think with hiring, you think some of that has to do with the affordability of living on the North Fork, or?
Yeah, I think that has part of it to do with it. You have to be a resident to take the test for what we hire now. But once you get hired, there's no residency requirement. So some officers we have lost some officers, probably only 2 or 3 to living in Riverhead, because it was a little bit cheaper for housing up there. But we've been able to keep everybody else as residents in town, which I think definitely helps the police department and helps the residents of the town. Like I said before, all having that relationship of living and working in town. But I think that's hurt a little bit. I think the negative portrayal of police during the George Floyd years and has not helped at all, because people started taking a negative look at of police work and what police officers have to do. So I think that's hurt a little bit.
What do you think of in terms of workforce housing for the area, in terms of possibly having people, whether they're in service industry, fire, police, or other city or town? Do you think that's something that would be a good option down the line for people wanting to work in the community that might be starting out and wanted to be on?
Yeah, definitely. It's if you look at the price of housing today, it's just astronomical, and for a young police officer that we hire on our job, they can't afford to. I mean, if it's just based on the salary that they're getting paid, they can't afford to buy houses now in town. So unless you have some kind of interest in another piece of property or a house or something, or get it through a family member, it's after the last 2 or 3 years, it just the prices of housing cut off at the under $500,000 mark, and I don't even think you can look at a house now for $800,000. So I think I think the effort is being made by the town and the village to try to address the housing, but giving whether it's police officers or people who work at the hospitals, nursing homes, the schools, just some place to live in town so they don't have to commute from further away, is always going to be an advantage.
And then just lastly, what do you hope for the future of the Southold Town Police Department and the community?
We have a lot of new things going on with the police department. We have a new building that they're planning on building in Peconic, which is much needed. The building we're in now was built in 1964, so we've outgrown that probably 20 years ago. So that's a lot to look forward to. It'll make a better work environment. But, I just hope that the hiring process goes the same way and we can retain the same type of officers that we have now. The town's always been supportive of the equipment that we have to buy, and I guess I'm sure it's a little hard to swallow at times when they see the prices, but they have been supportive of what we need to purchase for the police department, what we need to make it a professional police department, and I definitely like to think it is a professional police department. So I just like to see it keep going along those lines, and we'll see what the population does in Southold, whether the department, how big it has to expand to or not expand. I mean, right now we are experiencing a policing on Fisher's Island, which is the furthest east portion of Southold Town, which is very challenging. So the future may hold some changes, but I think we're definitely going in the right direction.
And is there anything else you'd like to discuss or say?
I think you've covered just about everything. Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's like I said, you being a police officer in the town has been a very good career. It supported my family, supported, ourselves, and, it's a great job, and I've always enjoyed it.
Well, I want to thank you so much for coming on the podcast today, and it was great to hear your story and your involvement in the community, especially in law enforcement. And I want to thank you so much for your service and involvement in the community as the police chief.
Thanks, Chris. It's my pleasure.
Well, I hope you enjoyed episode 18 with Chief Martin Flatley. I want to thank you for listening to the Floyd Memorial Library podcast, and we'll see you next time.